Good morning. I am Andrea with Happy Cloud Creations, and I'm jumping on because it is week 4 of the Joyful Meadows Quilt Along. I'm going to wait a couple minutes to get into it because I know it takes a while for people to find the video. If you haven't started this quilt along yet, it's not too late to join in. This week we are starting to make blocks. So last week we made half square triangles. Previous week we made flying geese, and before that we cut out all our fabrics. So this is a little slower pace quilt along just so that people can stay caught up. This week we will be making 4 of block 1. Um, and they'll go together super quick since we already finished those flying geese in the previous weeks. So I got my pattern, and the instructions for block 1. Let's see, they start on page 8. If you jump on, let me say hi so I can know if I can see comments or not. I know there's been in the past I haven't, so. If you jump on, let me say hi. Turn my volume down. Okay. So, I'll have that there too, just in case. Page 8, we will start making our block. This section right here tells you all the pieces you need for that block. I just did that so that it might be easier since we've already cut everything, just to go, oh, grab those pieces for my quilts. They're already cut and stacked, so we should be good. First, we're going to take, I'm doing the baby size, and I'm only doing 2 colors, but disregard my only 2 colors. And if you're doing all the colors, you're going to want to go according to the instructions, which is kind of, okay, so I was going to do 2 colors, but I was going to switch them. I was going to have the background be the flower and the white be the main color, but I'm so glad I didn't. I'm glad that I kept the white and did my print for the color, because I think it makes it a lot easier just looking through the pattern going, okay, all the colors are going to be my floral blue, any color is going to be my floral, and all the white is going to be white. So that was a little easier doing 2 colors that way. It might be a little more difficult if you're using several different colors. Good morning, Melanie. Oh, good. I can see comments. So first, this is when you're going to want to make sure you have a correct 1/4 inch seam, scant seam, whatever you want to call it. A seam that gives you the correct seam allowance. To do this, I've listed the instructions on the very first page of the pattern. I do that on all my patterns just so that you can test your seam allowance and make sure you have the correct seam allowance. When you sew, if you see the picture, when you sew 3 strips together, and then press your seams, 3 2.5 inch strips, this center seam of this final block, the center section of the final block, will be 2 inches exactly. If it's bigger than 2 inches, your seam allowance is too small. If it's smaller than 2 inches, your seam allowance is too big. So the whole reason we want to make sure that's the correct seam allowance is when we go to sew these together, we're not sewing 2 squares to this, we're sewing a strip. So most of mine I pressed toward the dark, but if you notice in the pattern, I put arrows for the best way to nest your seams if you follow the arrows. Sometimes you can just press toward the dark, or if you prefer pressing open to have less bulk, that's good too. Okay, good morning, good morning. Hi, Kathy. How are Marlua? Hope that's right. So first, we're doing the 2 squares together, and then I pressed it to the side. When I do that, I like to set my seam, and then I just finger press it open and then press my seam. Measure this. If it's not, so mine's supposed to be 2.5 by 4.5. If this is not 2.5 by 4.5, something's off with your seam allowance. Some machines you can adjust your needle. Mine is just stationary. So let's see if I can grab it. I have this special foot. It's a 1/4 inch foot that has this little guide on the side. And I just butt my fabric up to the guide and it gives me that 1/4 inch seam, correct 1/4 inch seam that I need. So next we're gonna sew these two pieces together. You don't really have to nest any seams, so I start from one side to the other. If this is too big, you can trim it down, but I would recommend measuring from the center out if you're trimming it down. But hopefully all your seams should be good and should be the correct seam allowance. So that's the first piece for the first unit. And I like to put here, this unit will measure maybe 4.5 by 4.5. That way, if you're making the king size or queen size, it's almost block size. The king size is going to be 9.5 by 9.5. And so once you get to the big finished blocks, they're more like sections of the quilts and not blocks because they're so huge. So that's why I like to go, okay, measure this unit to make sure it's the correct size. And then we're gonna sew our two flying geese together. The one tip I have for flying geese together is when you do it, I like to have the point side up, and then when you're sewing it, you want your seam to be a tiny bit above that triangle seam. This triangle seam, you want your next seam, if you do it that correct 1/4 inch, it'll rest right above that. So when you open it, you don't cut your point off. And you'll have two of these little guys for each block. And then we'll grab a square. This is the point you're going to want to try to nest seams right here in the center. I like to press one seam to one side, one seam to the other so that they nest just perfectly. You like just lay them down and they just kind of like butt up to each other so they nest nicely. And so I usually pin at the nesting points, like here. Oh, even here is a nesting point. So I pin at those nesting points and then I'll pin the rest of my block. And then I'll sew them together. So this is kind of like a block within a block. That's why I kind of broke it up into small sections, especially for those larger quilts. You could just take all the units that are listed in this last step right here, take all the units and just lay them out and sew them together in strips. But I thought it might be easier for people to do them in sections. Okay, so we have our top corner section done. The next, we're going to be going to basically two rectangles and a flying geese. You're going to want to, I just sewed these two rectangles together, did all 8 of them because you're going to have 8 of these units for one block. And then I went and sewed the flying geese to all the bottoms of them. And again, you know, having this side facing up, making sure your seam rests right above that little triangle seam. And then press according to the instructions because eventually we're going to be connecting this guy to this guy. So not all of the seams can go the same way. I dropped my pattern. Oh. Then we have this one where you're sewing 3 flying geese together. So we're gonna press these ones up. And since it's right next to this guy, we're gonna press these ones down, if that makes sense. If you're somebody that likes pressing things open, you can do that too. I just prefer pressing one side or the other. Hi, Andrea. I'm not talking to myself. There's Andrea in the group. So once you have this unit and this unit done, you're going to sew them together. But you want to make sure to notice the instructions. It says you're going to sew them this way for half of them and sew them this way for the other half. Just the way they position on that block, they're going to need to be sewed half this way and half this way. And with these two, I like to nest these seams here and then pin toward the outer sections. And then we got these little guys. I know some people have said the pattern from a distance looks complicated, but when you break it down into these little sections, I feel like it makes it a lot more manageable and easier to do it. If you're just like, okay, I'm going to focus on this unit now. They're done, set them aside. Now I'm going to focus on this unit, which this one is pretty simple. Again, we're going to want to make sure that our seams are good so that when you sew these two together and press it, this piece will line up correctly and be the same size, the same length. I pressed mine toward the floral. I'm pretty sure that's what it says in the directions. And then I attach this one. Usually when it's a long strip, I'll lay it down flat and then I'll pin in the center and then on the outer parts. And then press it toward the center. And then you got this little piece. Also, if anybody has questions about this block, please let me know. And then now that you have all the units, basically, if you see down in the bottom picture, you have all these units. You're going to want to measure those units and make sure they're the correct sizes listed here, which step 6, page 9, step 6 did have a tiny typo. I ordered more paper patterns, but then I didn't. Somebody brought this to my attention right after I ordered them. So the new paper patterns in the shop still have this little typo, but I think you guys will be smart enough to realize what it is. Step 6, baby size, it says 6.5 by 81 halves. And that should be 6.5 by 8.5 inches, not 81 halves. So I think you guys will understand that one. So, and all my other pattern corrections are on my blog. If you purchase the pattern after January 22nd, your pattern is good to go. If you purchased it before then, you can email me at happycloudcreations@gmail.com and I can send you a new PDF. But most of them are in these sections. It doesn't have to do anything with the flying geese or the half square triangles or the cutting instructions. It's just the setup of the pieces that you need. Okay, so now we have all of our pieces and all our blocks. We measured them, made sure they're all correct. And then ta-da! We're going to sew them all together. Let's see, it goes this way. I nested my seams here before sewing this strip and then pressed it this way. And then the bottom one got pressed this way. And then you nest these seams again. Here, here, and then press your seam and then finger press them open and then press. I don't do a lot of motion or steam when I'm at the block stage, just so that everything will lay nice and flat and doesn't get wonky. Sometimes flying geese and stuff get wonky if you use steam, but I like how it turned out. I kind of like the simplicity of just two colors. I've never done two colors before. I usually do multiple colors. This is what the original one looked like. So we got our, I remember, yellow, blue, orange, pink in this block. This is just the block. And then here is the one that I made second with the scrappy version of Common Steels. So I'm loving it in the multicolor, but then I'm also loving it in the two color. I hope you guys are enjoying this pattern. If anybody has questions about this week's block 1, we want to make 4 of block 1, and these will be our corner blocks. I noticed some people in the group realized they would need to position their squares differently, their center square differently because this block kind of rotates. So it's going to be up in this corner, and then it's going to rotate in that corner, rotate in that corner, rotate in that corner. Um, so directional prints could be a little tricky for this pattern. Just you got to map out, okay, which corner is it going to go into. But when I do directional prints, I just kind of think of them as a color. I don't really worry too much about direction, unless it's like a stripe or something like that. Um, but when you make the 4 at one time flying geese, you'll have two. Having flying geese. Show you. So like say you have a 4 at one time flying geese, two of the patterns, if you did a diagonal line, two of them will go this way and then two of them will go this way. So when you do that 4 at one time, you will get two that go horizontal, two that go vertical. And so when you're laying out your block, you might want to notice that and go, okay, and place them as need be. Yeah, so I'm excited to see everybody's quilts come together. I'm really excited. I'm loving all the pictures people are posting so far. Sherry, love this pattern, the way you broke it down and makes it less intimidating. Awesome, Sherry. That's what I was hoping. I was kind of worried about the length of the pattern because breaking it down that much did make it like 18 pages long. And I worry about people having to like print out those pages on their home computers. And that sometimes might be a little difficult. But I felt like if I just told you all these little pieces. Now you got to sew them together in rows. I thought that might be a little too much for the larger size quilts as well, since each block does have a lot of pieces. All right, and then next week we'll be going over block 2, and we'll be making 4 block 2 next week. This one also fairly easy since you have all the half square triangles together. There are a few units that you're gonna have to make that are not half square triangles, but you got this. And I'll go over that next week with you guys. And so if you have any questions, you can always put them in the group and say, hey, Andrea, I got a question about this block. And I will try to get to it as soon as possible. If I don't get to it, some other person in the block might, group might see it. That's okay. We will use it again and again. Yay! I'm up to block 1, step 6, pinned sewing soon. Only a few are off size. That's good, Bev. I know getting your blocks the accurate size does take a lot of practice. I know my first quilts, like they would be slightly varied, but I noticed sewing slower and making sure my seams are butted up against this 1/4 inch seam guide really helps in my whole block, overall block, ending up the correct size so that all my blocks are the same size and they can fit together like a puzzle. If there's any other questions, probably not. I think you guys are just like super awesome and can get this done. A week, I think a week's pretty good for just the 4 blocks since it's just like sewing the pieces together. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say. I can't think of anything. Hello. Oh, my kids. Hi. School hasn't quite started, so they're still in jammies. So next week, I guess I'll show you next week's block. It's a weird block. It's not square. It's a rectangle. So you'll be making 4 of this side block. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see everybody's come together. So we will say goodbye and we will talk to you next Wednesday, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, which is West Coast, United States. And I hope you guys have a great day and have fun sewing.